Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to continue our offseason preview series here on the channel where we discuss every single team in the NBA one by one. Today's video centers on the Dallas Mavericks, my Dallas Mavericks. So if you're a big time Mavericks fan, make sure to leave a like on today's video and also subscribe. And if you're not a Mavericks fan, I've got two things for you to do. First of all, comment down below which team you'd like to see next. Then also show some support for me and my fellow Mavs fans. We have been through it this season. So I really hope you guys do enjoy the content today. And without further ado, let's jump into that video preview here. We got the man of the hour, the guy who the franchise runs through, Nico Harrison here on the graphic. I'm sure he's loving all the fame and popularity of his name on Twitter and in the streets of Dallas, Fort Worth in the recent months. I'm sure he's just loving all of the attention. In this video, we're going to talk about the 2024-2025 season, what went right, what went wrong. Of course, I think having an idea and a scope of where this team is coming from, where they're currently at, going forward is really the best place to start. Then we're going to look at their NBA draft lottery odds, something I'm sure all Mavs fans thought was going to be such an important thing for the 2025 draft, given the fact they were in the NBA Finals in 2024. Surely everyone thought we'd be a lottery team again. We'll also then look at the NBA draft prospects to consider for them, depending on where they do fall in the lottery, whether they just stick around where their pick currently is projected to be, or if they do jump up into the top four. We're then going to look at the NBA free agency situation, and very importantly in this video, trade possibilities. You're definitely going to want to stay tuned until that part of the video. I have two very big names that I think would be intriguing landing spots for Dallas, intriguing targets for them to bring to the Dallas area. Then we'll look at the early outlook for next season. So how bad can things get? Well, we're going to look at how bad things just were this season. For the first time ever, I think in an offseason preview, I have a picture of a player in a different jersey on the season recap graphic. And the reason for that is we traded Luka Doncic, who is playing playoff basketball, and the Dallas Mavericks are not. One of the most brain-dead decisions in recent sports history, not just NBA history, not just basketball history, in the history of sports. One of the dumbest decisions was trading away Luka Doncic. It led the Mavericks to a path with a 39-43 record. Now, the Luka Doncic trade is not the only thing that led them that way. The Mavericks really struggled this year and were really extremely unlucky when it came to their health. At one point this year, they were 19-10 going into Christmas Day when Luka Doncic got hurt. The Mavericks were a very, very good team, especially at the beginning of the year. Everything looked like it was clicking. Everything was panning out. And then a slew of injuries hit, including Luka Doncic's injury, which ultimately concluded his career in Dallas prematurely. Not only did the Mavs trade Luka Doncic, they also traded Quentin Grimes, who balled out pretty big time for the tanking Philadelphia 76ers down the stretch. Not sure Quentin Grimes is going to be able to carry over that load and efficiency and effectiveness for a team, especially not for a winning team moving forward. But it was obviously still a downgrade. I thought Quentin Grimes had found a home in Dallas, specifically with the Mavericks, because of the role he was playing for them. Obviously not exceeding and producing the way he was for Philadelphia, but I thought had really kind of solidified himself as one of the mainstay backcourt pieces for Dallas around Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Obviously, Nico Harrison and the Mavs front office shook this team up drastically around the trade deadline this year. And then they had other bad luck as well. Kyrie Irving tears his ACL after the NBA trade deadline. Again, extremely bad luck. We're hoping for the best for Kyrie Irving. We don't want to see players hurt at all in the NBA, especially ones as talented as Kyrie Irving, who are so fun to watch play the game. And he's really settled into Dallas, was averaging roughly 25 points this year, and was doing a lot of the heavy lifting for Dallas's offense as a creator, ball handler after the Luka Doncic trade. Anthony Davis obviously injured his groin in the very first 31 minutes of his Mavericks career. Data Davis made his return, and I do think he played really well for Dallas. Is one thing I do want to say. The Mavericks have a good roster, and they do have a very competitive team. Again, does that justify trading away Luka Doncic? Absolutely not. I don't think the Mavericks are good enough at all to contend for a title the way that they are currently constituted and built, but they are a good team. So you need to keep that in mind, even though obviously in this video so far I've taken a bunch of playful jabs at Nico Harrison and the Mavericks for their decision making over the last few months, and honestly it goes back for a few years, not keeping Jalen Brunson, trading away Kristaps Porzingis for checks notes, Davis Bertans and Spencer Dinwiddie. You know, a lot of people liked that trade for Dallas at the time too, which is just otherworldly absurd. the situation this year was not good. Obviously, Gafford, Lively both missed a lot of time. PJ Washington missed some time even. But when they are healthy, this team is very good still. Klay Thompson, I think, is the biggest loser, honestly, from the NBA trade deadline because he came to Dallas to play with Luka Doncic. He looked at Luka and the kind of shots that he would get as a result of Luka's passing, scoring gravity, driving kick game. And now he's in Dallas without Luka Doncic. So Klay Thompson, really unfortunate for him, only shot about 44% on twos this year, which was really inefficient. But he did maintain a very effective three-point shot diet, as you could expect. Shot about 39% from three again this year. So he's a very, very good three-point shooter still. That's not surprising. No one should be shocked by that. I remember last year everyone was kind of freaking out about his 0 of 10 performance in the play-in. I think that was all rectified this year with the way he played. Obviously, there has been diminished athleticism from his injury history, but he still is an effective offensive player because of his shooting gravity. Now, how does Dallas really channel that, and do they run plays enough for him to really maximize him without Luka Doncic? The answer to that is probably no going forward, but I do think Klay kind of gave the Mavericks the season you could have expected from him, and given his contract, it's, I think, very well worth having him on the roster at the price point he's making. Max Christie, obviously one of the young promising pieces on this team. He was an awesome get for the Mavericks in the trade with Luka Doncic. Now, again, don't like the trade, but Max Christie's a very good 3-and-D player, very competitive defensively, closes out extremely well, plays on balance defensively, and does a good job mirroring ball handlers and specifically keeping his chest in front. I think all of those things are going to make him an effective long-term piece for Dallas, assuming they don't do something crazy and trade him. And then Najee Marshall, one of my favorite signings of all last offseason. If you go back to my 2024 offseason discussion, especially my live streams, when Najee Marshall signed, I was over the moon for Dallas, especially with his role kind of in New Orleans thinning out, and then ultimately the Pelicans not really wanting to keep him. He was a great get for Dallas. I think Mavericks fans will feel really, really happy with him on the roster. And I think this year you got to see a real plethora of his talent, whether it was the playmaking, at times a little wild, right? Sometimes the live dribble playmaking decisions and passes are turnover prone, and he's very not safe with the ball. But some of the stuff he does is very, very good as a passer. And then you also look at, the scoring, the downhill, finishing at the rim, transition offense, and then also the shooting, I think, has found a really healthy spot in his career at this point. And then also, obviously, defensively, he's another really competitive, big-bodied forward wing who can guard up and down the lineup a bit. The Mavericks do have a very good team. Again, I want to talk about that a lot in this little segment here because it's important to know that this team is not just flat out terrible. They're not going to be a team that I think moving forward just wins 35 games and is locked into the 11 seed in the Western Conference, for example. Like, if you do get Kyrie Irving back healthy at some point, probably not in the next 10 months, but at some point, hopefully soon. And then Anthony Davis, if he's healthy, if you have Gafford, Lively, PJ Washington, Klay, Max Christie, Najee Marshall, you do have a good team. And you have a team that's going to rebound extremely effectively. You have a team that can really bolster with size and win around the rim. And you think about the high-low action. We saw it at times this year with Anthony Davis throwing some lobs to his fellow big men there in the front court. I do think there's a lot to work with here. I do need to see Jason Kidd continue to get more and more creative with the offense. But the defense is going to be really strong, as you can expect. I mean, how many times have we heard it from Nico Harrison that quote-unquote defense wins championships? While I don't agree with that bet technically for his roster and the way that they're built right now, I do think they are a good team moving forward. So I do think that's an important note going into their 2025 NBA Draft lottery odds, because the Mavericks are projected to have a lottery pick, will have a lottery pick this year, and that pick is projected to be 11th overall, with a near 78% chance to ultimately be pick 11. Now, they also do have a chance to jump into the top 4, and that's not a crazy thing to see. Last year, remember, the Hawks jumped all the way up to pick number 1, despite being in similar territory to where the Mavericks currently are pre-NBA Draft Lottery, which is May 12th this year, by the way. The top 4 odds, they have an 8.5% chance of moving up in the lottery, which isn't great. That's not a great chance, not a great likelihood, not something you'd want to bet on, but it's not a zero chance, right? This is a near 1 in 10 odds. It's about 1 in 12 odds for the Mavericks to ultimately have a top 4 pick, which is really, really awesome, and almost a 2% chance at landing Cooper Flagg first overall. And if the Mavericks do get the first overall pick, first of all, I think a lot of people would be raising their eyebrows about, how fishy that is, and Is there some little secret agenda? A lot of people already think Adam Silver was involved in the Mavs-Lakers trade to begin with, which is obviously ludicrous and ridiculous. He wasn't. This is just Nico Harrison being bad at his job. But if the Mavericks get the first pick, there's going to be even more people saying, look at what Adam Silver did. So it would be crazy if they do. They probably won't. I mean, it's a sub 2% chance. But I did want to mention that in this video. And then when it comes to their chance to fall in the draft lottery, it's, again, not a non-0% chance. They have a 13.5% chance, actually, at falling down to pick 12, which would mean one team below them at pick 12, 13, or 14 did jump up into the top 4, which we have seen happen in years past as well. There's also a 0.5% chance that they fall all the way down to pick 13, which would require 2 teams to jump in the lottery, which very unlikely, as you can tell by that 0.5% chance, is probably not going to happen. But again, I wanted to cover that as a possibility. So the Mavericks very likely will be picking 11, possibly could pick 12. Very, very unlikely, but possible they could pick 13, and almost impossible to have pick 14. It's not impossible, but the odds of that happening are basically not worth talking about. So that's kind of the NBA draft lottery odds. Now let's talk about prospects that make sense. And obviously, if they do jump up, you have the usual suspects at the top. Cooper Flagg if they get the first pick, Dylan Harper if they get the second pick. Otherwise, you get to pick 3 or 4. And you have a big question on your hands. Do we go with Ace Bailey, someone who has significant upside as a shot maker and can be a long-term scorer potentially and hopefully for the Dallas Mavericks? Or do you go with someone like VJ Edgecombe, who's an athletic monster, fills a lot of space defensively, and I still think is growing defensively. There's, I've talked a lot about it in my mock drafts about his two-way defensive potential. At this point, it is still potential. He's not walking into the league as this on-ball stopper, but he's got a lot of the physical tools, and with the right coaching and the right personnel around him, which Dallas really could offer to VJ Edgecombe, the transition from Baylor to Dallas would not be a bad one at all for him, I think, defensively. And then obviously the Mavericks, with Kyrie Irving out to start next season, could offer VJ Edgecombe some significant on-ball reps at the beginning of his career to hopefully help usher in and further his development offensively as a ball handler, a decision maker. Now, I do think he has a lot of room to grow still in those areas as well. He's a real upside prospect. He's a true freshman, someone who is highly touted coming out of high school, and obviously had an impressive but not perfect season for the Baylor Bears. So those are the top 4 guys probably in the realm of conversation. Now, I did exclude big men in this. Kamen Malawach, Derek Queen. I just don't see Dallas really going that way. But if they do end up sticking around pick 11, pick 12-ish, depending on what happens in the lottery, there are guard prospects who I could very much see Nico Harrison considering for the Dallas Mavericks. Kasparas Jakučionis is one of the headliners. International point guard, played for Illinois this past year, and really found a lot of success, especially early in the season. Now, there's a lot, and I mean a lot of hate right now toward Jakučionis because of turnover issues and lack of ball security. I do think for Illinois, first of all, he was tasked with creating so much for their offense. The usage rate really doesn't show what he was tasked with doing, in my opinion. When you watch the film, it just suggests something different than what the actual numbers suggest from a usage rate standpoint. When it comes to creating offense and really, driving the basketball, getting to 2 feet in the paint, or forcing the defense to shift in a certain way, I think Jakučionis would be brilliant with Dallas. I really think he would be so good at attacking drop coverage with big lob threats around him. And with a shooter like Klay Thompson, this is the way that you can reclaim some of that value that you lost when you traded Luka Doncic. You get a playmaker like Kasparas Jakučionis who throws a lot of risky but very, very dangerous passes, and dangerous in a good way, where it puts pressure on team defenses in a certain way that you either have to aggressively close out or you force them into a rotation that they don't want to get into. Jakučionis has the positional size to do those things, and the passing IQ, vision, and the passing touch to actually accomplish those as well. Then you get into someone like Jeremiah Fears, who has, I think, more on-ball scoring potential, I think a better handle at this point in time than Kasparas Jakučionis, and very, very likely going to be a better isolation player and at times a better pick-and-roll scorer than Kasparas Jakučionis, despite some of Jakučionis' three-point upside and better success rate in the college game. Jeremiah Fears has a lot of that intangible. When you watch him play, you just see a lot of things that could possibly click into place for him. And landing somewhere like Dallas with some awesome screen setters, some lob threats, some guys who could be really dynamic in short rolls like Anthony Davis, Jeremiah Fears could be a very, very fun fit for the Dallas Mavericks. Yegor Demin, another guy who people are going to talk about, especially with Dallas, because you think about the defense identity. People always just tend to think, oh, well, a big jumbo point guard would be super useful there. I really don't see Yegor Demin as a point guard. I think he's kind of this wing with some point guard skills when it comes to passing, connectivity, making the right play, and occasionally you can throw him into ball screens. I don't think Yegor Demin should be a point guard. I don't think for the Mavericks he would be the point guard of the future, but I do understand some of the allure because you look at, he's a 6'7" guard with the ability to play make and pass, and he's another high leverage passer. I talked about that with Yakichonis throwing dangerous passes. Yegor Demin does that to an even higher degree where he's going to be very, very turnover prone, but he's also going to make passes where you say, oh my gosh, that was such a good pass because of its accuracy, precision, timing, and velocity. That's one of my favorite things to talk about with Yegor Demin, even though I am a little bit lower than him than most at this point in time. Yegor Demin's pass velocity is something that is really, really, really impressive to me, and he does it out of unorthodox passing angles and really creative ways as well. So it's not like Yegor Demin's a risky he is a risky project, but what I'm trying to say is it's not like taking him as an absolute, oh my gosh, what are the Mavericks doing? It's just you're going to have to be okay with a lot of bumps in the road, I think, in his development offensively especially, and I don't think defensively he's the super sound player either, just because he has very great positional size. Jace Richardson out of Michigan State, I think someone who is just a very natural fit into Dallas, someone who can really thrive in a low usage role. We saw that early in the season for Michigan State, but also showcasing in his college freshman season that he can take on more than he was even asked to at times, especially as a starter, was really called upon more and more throughout the course of the season to create offense for the Spartans, play off of handoffs, play out of certain actions, and then also create out of either isolation or pick and roll basketball a bit. And Jace Richardson really thrived in that. Obviously, true shooting percentage backs that up. Had a really great freshman season for the Michigan State Spartans, who went quite a ways in the NCAA tournament. So I think this is the notable list of players. Obviously, the Mavericks could look another way, right? Nico Harrison has thrown us some curveballs in the last 12 months. So don't rule anything out, but these are the guys that I really wanted to highlight in this offseason preview. So when it comes to their NBA free agency situation, they are projected right now a current maximum of negative $37.5 million, but with their cap holds and some of their options and everything included, they're more likely to be around negative $67.122 million in cap space. And a lot of you right now are saying, whoa, negative $67 million in cap space, what are they going to do? Well, they're about $900,000 away from the first apron. So they don't have a lot of flexibility. They really don't. And that's going to dictate their free agency a bit. They can't go in and make a whole bunch of signings. They're not going to have the mid-level exception to them. And with some of the new CBA rules, it will be tricky to make sign-in trades, which we'll talk about in this video. It'll be tricky to really make a lot of moves if that's what they want to do. Now, the nice thing is they do have quite a few players already under contract. Their roster is set up in a spot right now where they are going to be fairly comfortable going into next season with the way their roster is set up if they want to. I think some of the biggest notes, Dwight Powell, $4 million player option. He will opt into that. He would be stupid not to, in my opinion. That's a lot of money for Dwight Powell. And then Kyrie Irving. This is the big question mark. This is the big wild card for him this offseason, especially with his injury and maybe looking for some real long-term security if he feels like Dallas is the home he wants to spend the end of his NBA career in. That $43.962 million player option, he could opt out of that and sign a multi-year deal. We've seen other NBA stars opt out of the final year of their contract, then ultimately stick with their initial team. Kyrie Irving, I think, is a very good candidate for this offseason, and you might be able to give Dallas a little bit more flexibility if he takes $38 million or $36 million in the initial year of his next contract. If it's a 4-year, $140 million contract, 4-year, $160 million contract even, he could save the Mavericks some front-end money right now, which gives them a little bit of extra space against that first apron, and it opens up some real flexibility to improve their roster if they want to go about it that way, or to completely shake up their roster with another big trade. And they do have some movable contracts, and it's very important. These 4 players specifically I've listed for a reason. PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, both entering the final years of their deal. They both make slightly more than $14 million. Those 2 contracts I think are very essential, as is Klay Thompson's. I talked about how I thought the value on his contract was still pretty fair. He's making a bit more than the mid-level exception, maybe a little high for what he's going to be moving forward, but it's not this outrageously bad contract, right? $16.5 million, a little bit more than that, is not that bad for someone who is a career 39 to 40 something percent three-point shooter who has still a ton of gravity. If you watch how teams guard him moving off of off-ball screens, that's exactly what you're paying him for. You're paying him for the gravity more than even the results of his gravity. So I think that's an important note to keep. But again, $16.67 million, very important number. And Caleb Martin, who they got for Quentin Grimes at the NBA trade deadline, makes $9.5 million, a little bit more than that next season. Those 4 contracts, keep them in mind. We're going to come back to them in a couple of minutes here. But what we're going to first talk about are some free agent targets. Now, this is kind of a pipe dream list. I'll be completely honest with you. Most of these guys are not going to be really in the realm of possibility for Dallas, but I had to come up with something here for guys that I think Dallas would benefit by landing. Ty Jerome obviously has had a huge breakout season for Cleveland. We've seen him thrive in double big lineups as a ball handler because of his ability to manipulate pick and roll. One of the more effective pick and roll players this entire year, extremely effective and efficient as a shooter. Really love everything Ty Jerome brought to the Cleveland Cavaliers this year and is continuing to bring to them in the playoffs as well. He would be a sign and trade candidate. Obviously, that's tricky again with the first apron rules, new CBA rules, and all of the stipulations that come with that, where the Mavericks would hard cap themselves again, which would again cause more problems. It would be very difficult to actually land Ty Jerome in a sign and trade, but he would be an awesome get for the backcourt for sure for Dallas. Tyus Jones is a bit more of a realistic option. Of course, took a quote-unquote huge pay cut to play for the Phoenix Suns this year. I really don't think his market was that great to begin with last offseason, especially as a starting point guard. Not a lot of teams were interested in that. Pretty much nobody besides Phoenix, and then he ultimately lost his starting job in Phoenix this year to Colin Gillespie. So the Suns, I don't know what his future looks like for Tyus Jones. Probably not going to stay in Phoenix if I had to guess. So with that in mind, I do think Tyus Jones open to maybe playing in another NBA city. Dallas could be a team looking for backcourt depth, especially for, a 1-year minimum contract or maybe a little bit more, something in that kind of biannual exception range in terms of salary. Tyus Jones is a name that definitely could make some sense for Dallas, especially while Kyrie Irving's out. Tristan Newton, a 2-way contract player for the Minnesota Timberwolves, was drafted actually by the Indiana Pacers. Ultimately, the Pacers moved on from Tristan Newton, which was a little surprising to me. He caught on very quickly with Minnesota, though. And I do think for the Mavericks, Tristan Newton's a restricted free agent. The Wolves have their own slew of salary cap concerns moving forward. Going after someone like Tristan Newton would be really great for them. Chris Paul's another name I wanted to throw on here. You think about the lob passing, one of the better pocket passers and lob passers in the last 25, 30 years. The point guard still has a little bit of juice in him, led the Spurs this year in win shares, and was quite effective for them. I think pairing him with Wembanyama was very good for San Antonio. I do think CP3 ultimately does stick in San Antonio, but I would love to see him in a Dallas uniform with their bigs that they have on the roster right now. Trey Jones, brother of Tyus Jones, of course, the younger brother of Tyus Jones. For Chicago, probably not going to happen again. I do think either the Bulls retain him or he catches on with the team that's more in rebuild mode and looking to probably up his value by playing more minutes than what Dallas is probably going to even afford him given their injury stuff right now. But I think Trey Jones to Dallas would be fun to watch for sure. But I do think Tyus Jones out of the Jones brothers is the more likely one to land in Dallas. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, another pipe dream player. He would be so good, especially once Kyrie Irving's back at some point. Nickeil Alexander-Walker would be a perfect 3-and-D plus player who can handle the ball, play make a bit, and kind of alleviate some of the pressure off of Kyrie Irving without being a non-additive offensive player when he's sharing the floor with Kyrie Irving. And I think that would be a super good get for Dallas. Again, it would hinge on a sign and trade because Nickeil is going to get paid pretty handsomely this summer. I think well above what the Mavericks are going to be able to offer. But again, I wanted to include some names here. I didn't want this to be we can't sign anybody, which is probably the reality here at this point. I don't think the Mavericks are going to be the most active free agent suitors this offseason, but they are going to be active in other ways. And that way is going to be via trade. Nico Harrison's not done yet. There are 2 big trade targets who I do think make a good deal of sense for the Dallas Mavericks. Trae Young, probably not going to happen, but if there's a star guard who becomes available this offseason, you would have to think it is Trae Young. The Mavericks have their own first-round pick in 2025, which we've talked about in this video. They have that Lakers pick in 2029, and then they also have a far-out future first as well, which they could trade. So they have 3 first-round picks. They have some salaries that they could get there with. But the one I really want to talk about here, the one that's more likely, is Kevin Durant, a Nike athlete. You think about the 2 players at this point that Nico Harrison has really actively targeted to bring to Dallas. It was Kyrie Irving, a former Nike athlete, and Anthony Davis, a Nike athlete. Nico Harrison, for those of you who do not know, former Nike executive, worked on shoe deals, was actually in cahoots basically with Rob Pelinka when Kobe Bryant was a Nike athlete and Rob Pelinka was Kobe Bryant's agent. There's a lot of connections, obviously, behind the scenes that lead to some of these decisions and trades and moves. The Nike ties are undeniable. And Kevin Durant, who has 16, 17 plus pairs of signature Nikes, is a name that Nico Harrison will be interested in acquiring if possible. And the salaries, remember those 4 I talked about earlier with PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, Klay Thompson, Caleb Martin? They add up to $54.802 million next season. Kevin Durant makes $300,000 less than that at $54.708 million. Now, they will need a third team, very likely, for this trade, just given the fact that Phoenix is a second apron team, and the Mavericks obviously are right along that first apron. There will be some difficulties in getting a trade done, but ultimately that third team would either take in Klay Thompson or Caleb Martin, likely, in a trade. Now, it would be awkward for Klay Thompson and Devin Booker to become teammates all of a sudden, but if Dallas wants to get Kevin Durant, it would maybe take a draft pick or 2 and those 4 contracts. I do think this would make Phoenix a lot better. This would be a home run trade construction for Phoenix, in my opinion. And for Dallas specifically, the idea would be to pair Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and Kyrie Irving together, who a few years back had plans to try and play together in Boston with Jason Tatum. Ultimately did not ever come to fruition, did not work out. But Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving all have connections together. They obviously all get along. The Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving saga in Brooklyn just did not work out, but I don't think there's a ton of ill will there between the two of them personally, and I do think a reunion in Dallas would not be heavily fought against by either party. So Kevin Durant to Dallas, I don't think that is a foregone no. In fact, I think it's a very real possibility and one that I think you really need to watch for this summer. So when it comes to next season, I think the Mavericks are going to be a very good but not great team. Again, that is an evisceration of their roster by trading away Luka Doncic. This team was set up to be a great team for a long time. Even with all of my scrutiny, the lack of owning their own draft picks moving forward, especially 2027 through 2030, Nico Harrison's made a lot of terrible moves. I referenced it with Brunson, Porzingis, Doncic. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff I could harp on in this video. The lack of draft picks, the sign and trade for Grant Williams, this, that, and the other thing. There's a lot of ways he screwed up. None of them come to the magnitude of trading away Luka Doncic at the age and success rate he's had early in his career. It was an abysmal decision. And I know some people are going to say, why are you still talking about it? It's because it's, again, one of the worst trades we've seen in recent sports history. You can't talk about the Dallas Mavericks for the next 5 years without referencing this trade. I really believe that. So if you're annoyed about it, I'm sorry, but you're going to continue to be annoyed about it because it's that big of a deal. The Mavericks, out of every team in the league, really need NBA draft lottery luck. Getting Cooper Flagg would solve a lot of issues. It would really remake this team, and it would really, really, really provide some relief for Mavericks fans. And to this front office, it would buy them a lot of time of saying, look, we have a new build-around face of the franchise young player that you guys can fall in love with again. If they don't get that lottery luck, the Mavericks are going to be in a tough place. I think next year they're going to win about 45 to 50 games, which is good enough to be a playoff team in the Western Conference. They'll maybe be in that play-in mix again, depending on how the seeding and standings shake out. Obviously, we'll have to see how the actual offseason goes, what big moves are made. If they trade for Kevin Durant, they're really betting on an old injury-prone team, which I don't love. But I think this team is going to be pretty good. And the real question is, what else does Nico do? Because if it's a trade for Kevin Durant, if it's a trade for Trae Young, it does remake this team again very quickly, and it costs some of their depth. I don't think a team, if you trade Gafford and Klay and PJ Washington and Caleb Martin for Durant, I don't think a team with Lively, Davis, Durant, and a returning from injury Kyrie Irving is really that good long term, and I don't know if it's good enough to beat a team like Oklahoma City, who's going to be way more athletic, physical, stronger, better passing team than the Dallas Mavericks are. So I have a lot of concerns for this team, and I just don't think they're going to be a great team. I think they're going to be a very good team, a very competitive team, a team that's fun to watch. I think people are going to enjoy the style of play that the Mavericks bring next year, but I don't think it's going to be ever to the level of a championship during Anthony Davis or Nico Harrison's tenure in Dallas. I really hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Mavericks fans, again, as a fellow MFFL, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. But I hope you guys did enjoy. Again, smash that like button and subscribe if you did, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.